Hi everyone, my name is Matt Barrington. I'm the EY CTO and Global AI Leader. And with me today is John Roese, Dell Technologies CTO and Chief AI Officer. I know in market you've been talking quite a bit around three specific market areas of AI and how it's rolling out. We know it's moving fast. You've been talking about that quite a bit. One of the areas we're very focused on is around enterprise AI. So it'd be great to get your perspective a little bit around what you're seeing shape around enterprise AI.
As we said, there's three markets. There's the pre-gen AI market, reinforcement learning, machine learning, that's all great. The analog front end. There's the training market, which is foundation models, mega clusters, giga clusters. We're doing a lot of work there. And then there's enterprise, which is, interestingly enough, a very different market, because the enterprise AI market is all about the application of AI against your most impactful processes and the most important parts of your business to change the productivity equation of your enterprise, which is very different than the search for AGI or ASI. But one of the things that's happened in that market recently is, in the last several months, it's actually become two different paths forward. The first path, which was the first generation of generative AI, chatbots, RAG, unlocked the data of the enterprise. But the second path forward, which is something called Agentic, is actually really about digitizing the skills of the enterprise. And the two of them together are now kind of creating a very interesting landscape to really accelerate enterprise transformation.
So John, I don't know how much time you were able to spend last week at GTC, but that was front and center. So to your point, there's a lot of different trajectories that are happening as the AI evolution continues to grow. Agent was the top word of the week at NVIDIA's GTC. And really, around enterprise adoption. So one of the things we're seeing very rapidly, to your point, is the ability to take data, curate that data, and turn it into a set of capabilities that you can actually use to take action. So like the thing we've been talking about in market is, the early days of LLMs and generative AI, while super interesting, have really been kind of centered around the right questions or prompts. You can get the right answers, and it's been very helpful from a productivity perspective. What we're keenly interested in is this next era where agents can actually start to take actions. And to your point, we believe that's going to be highly collaborative, with humans and AI needing to work together. There's going to be a high degree of orchestration. So it's super interesting to see how some of that is shaping rapidly in market.
Yeah, everything we can see, and it's still very early on Agentic, but when we built our first autonomous agents about a year ago, we've been working with them for quite a while in the early stages, but everything we can see is it is really an expanded tool set. It brings autonomy. Sometimes I describe it, the first generation of AI in the generative world was the human in the loop. You were very involved in doing stuff with these tools around you. The agentic world, it is human on the loop. You tell it what to do, you give it instructions, you define good and bad, but it does the work. And the speed in which it can do that work and the complexity that it can go navigate, especially ensembles of agents working across domains, that has just enormous disruptive potential for the kind of productivity curve that people are trying to achieve. Maybe a question for you, Matt. I mean, at GTC, but you and I have been talking for a while. You guys have some announcements, and you're actually not just talking about this stuff. You're doing work in it and starting to build technology. How's that going? What's the current course and speed? Because we're going to need a lot of actual systems people can use.
Yeah, so John, we had a big announcement last week at GTC in partnership with NVIDIA. We call it our EY.AI Agentic platform, and we're pretty excited about it. To your point, there's a lot of talking, not as much doing. So we've been hyper-focused on building what we think are the core capabilities that we need for our own AI disruption. At the end of the day, EY is a group of 400,000 knowledge workers, so we're taking this very seriously around the productivity improvements, the art of possibility that we think we can drive from agentic adoption, et cetera. And then obviously in market with our clients cross-sector, it's a big topic of interest. Everyone's trying to move away from the POCs of yesteryear into how to adopt these capabilities at scale. So the announcement last week was big for us. There are three things I would highlight with it. One, through NVIDIA and through their capabilities that they rolled out last week, especially with Nemotron, we will now have the ability to build our own private models. So whether that's pre-training, post-training, the inference compute runtime capabilities, or a mix of all three with fine-tuning in the mix, we are going to codify our 100 years of knowledge and expertise and curated data into a set of function and domain-specific models. We'll use those models to actually power our agentic workforce. To your point, if you think of what's going to start to happen, you're going to need to shape in a very complex system model, the ability to actually orient those agents against bulk work. And that's going to take a lot of refinement. So we want to make sure that we're plumbing our agents into our curated data sets and into the reasoning models themselves. And then third, we'll talk about this, I think, a bit later in our conversation. We're super excited about the pathing that we've got with the NVIDIA software frameworks, the Agent IQ model that they rolled out last week, NIMS, the Nematron capabilities, et cetera, all give us some extensibility and portability, especially from a deployment model standpoint. So one of the things that we're seeing pick up a lot of momentum cross-sector, whether we're talking to the large banks and financial services, the large manufacturers, life sciences companies, oil and gas companies, et cetera, is the need to have lots of choice around where AI is going to run. You all have been talking for a while, rightfully so, around it isn't about data and AI, it's about bringing AI to the data. So the flexibility for deployment models across hyperscalers with cloud models, your own private environments, your private hosted environments, and then ultimately the capabilities that you need with Edge is going to be really important. So we like the framework that we've got and the core platform capabilities that have multiple choices of deployment.
Yeah, one really important thing in the enterprise market is we're still early. Most enterprises haven't activated yet. And I've always said the two things we need to be true for the enterprise market to really take off are, one, we have to have reusable, standardized technology. They have to be able to consume a technology, not just have to build it themselves. We're getting closer. We have a lot more consumable off-the-shelf technologies. And the second is they need people to follow. No enterprise wants to be the first mover, the very first person to use an agent. And so, our Dell is customer zero, your customer zero efforts, the more we tell that story and show people what we've done and worked through the issues, the more confidence they have to get moving on this journey. So very, very excited about, everything that's going on in the industry right now, because if we close those two gaps, it becomes a lot easier for literally millions of enterprises downstream to get on this journey to, significant productivity improvement.
Yeah, we agree. I mean, our own client zero story has been really impactful. I talk about that on a daily basis with clients, with analysts, with the press. And there is a difference. I mean, it's fascinating. You and I talked about this a while back, right? If you just look at the trajectory and the clip rate of change in this market, like this tech innovation is, frankly, I think it's the fastest tech epoch change I've ever seen in my career. I've seen some interesting ones. It's just fascinating to see how quickly this one is moving, yet the adoption capability is lagging. So anything we can do to simplify and demystify and bring together the right software and hardware constructs are going to be important. And by the way, this is a different software model, right? I mean, that's kind of the power of these things. If you get it down to the lowest level, this is a very different orientation of how software is going to run and operate. And clearly the supporting infrastructure models have been very different. So we're excited about that. In the announcement we had last week, we were very crisp. We are one of the top tax providers globally. So we are hyper-focused on refactoring how we deliver tax services to be all agentified within the coming year. We've got 150 agents we will be rolling out at scale across a number of tax jurisdictions in an ever-changing tax environment. And we're pretty excited about the early results we're seeing.
Yep, super excited. We have a lot of work to do, but for those of us who are on the front row of this, I have never seen a productivity enhancement capability that we're about to see as we move into this new phase. The hilarious thing is in my predictions in December, I talked about agentic would be the word of 2025, and literally in December, I had to explain what an agent was. We are less than 4 months later, and this is like the word of the year. Everybody's talking about it. That's how fast this industry is going.
It's going fast, but I would be curious if you think people understand what agents mean at this point. Because I hear it's great, everyone's talking about it. I would suggest we could probably be a little bit better benefited with a bit of a common taxonomy around some of this.
I just recorded a video to try to explain what an agent is and what it isn't, because we have a lot of confusion. The good news is it is what it is. It's a brand new autonomous capability that can interact with the real world, can sense the real world, has memory, learning, dynamic data underneath it, can be distributed. We don't have those. We didn't have those a year ago, 6 months ago. We are now just starting to have them. The problem is we've used that term agent all over the place. We have to kind of unwind it and really describe autonomous agents correctly.
Well said. So, as I mentioned, one of the things we're keen on with this core platform from an agentic perspective is choice, and helping our clients understand that it isn't a one-size-fits-all, just like it isn't a one-model rules-all kind of world. So choice of deployment model is going to be, super important for us. So one of the things I know our two teams have been heads down and working on, which we're excited about, is an enterprise private capability for our clients to be able to adopt agents within a private on-premises solution. Would you spend a few minutes kind of talking about like why you see benefit in that? And I'm glad to return the favor.
Yeah, no. I mean, from the first days of generative AI, we have been pretty opinionated about the fact that this is incredibly sensitive and important technology. These are your new systems of record. These are the center of your business. And because of that, they're dealing with the most confidential and important information you could imagine. And so for a couple of years now, we've highly suggested people make strategic infrastructure decisions about where they run these. It impacts their compliance and regulatory obligations. Clearly, if you have less third parties involved in it, it's easier to achieve those outcomes. But more importantly, economically and performance-wise, we've realized that the real high-performance, significant AI projects, when you run them in an environment that is predictable, it has predictable costs, it has predictable environments, predictable, which is code for when you run it in a private environment, it just simply achieves better outcome. It's lower cost, it's more reliable, it tends to be more performant. And so, at the end of the day, we're maybe a little biased, but we have proven at Dell, we have 100,000 team members benefiting significantly from our first 4 major areas that we focused on. And almost that entire tech stack is running in private environments, and we feel very good about that. As we think about agentic, it gets a bit more complex because agentic has to be everywhere. And so we know that it's not just going to be a choice of public data center or private data center, even though both of those will be important. It's also your AI PC, your edges. These are additional private environments. And it also, looking the other way, agentic becomes an interface into other software ecosystems. So it becomes an API between you and the future SaaS providers and other service providers that you interact with. And so, look, from day one, I'm on record like 12 years ago when the cloud journey started saying the end state is not one big central thing to rule them all. That is not going to work. These are distributed systems that will inevitably go to where the users, where the data, where the best places. They gravitationally migrate towards the places where they get the best outcome, and that is never a single answer. One of the advantages we have as Dell, or 2 advantages, I guess, are 1, we participate in this end-to-end. We've been unambiguous about multi-cloud is the answer. You're going to use multiple clouds and multiple topologies to deliver your IT outcome. That is true for agentic, it was true for chatbots, and it was true for everything before that. In addition to it being multi-cloud, we also have been very clear that the type of compute that you use also needs to be consistent, and that means that end-to-end systems matter. If you have a completely different strategy for your AI PC versus your private cloud environment versus your edge environment, you're going to have a really difficult time deploying an end-to-end behavior across that environment. And so, we just happen to have the advantage of being end-to-end from an infrastructure perspective, and in the past that was convenient. I think as we move into agentic, it is essential. Because if you can't connect these dots, if the infrastructure is fragmented, all of the aspirations to create a consistent AI behavior might actually be problematic.
We agree. I mean, it's interesting. You're coming at it from typically where you would expect Dell to operate around the infrastructure and software layers and the capability of multiple deployment models. We're coming at it top down. So if you think of what our clients are looking for, to your point around the art of productivity and possibility, we're helping our clients figure out an entirely new way to have an AI business value chain construct, become AI powered. And to your point, that will not be point by point, that will not be process by process. You will fundamentally be refactoring at a business function level. And that has to be comprehensive across your entire stack. So the ability to tailor these capabilities, have fit for purpose where you need it, and then your opening point, which we completely agree with, and I hear this on a daily or weekly basis from clients, as you're thinking about your competitive differentiators moving forward, it becomes really important to protect those. I mean, a lot of these capabilities are going to get commoditized, and rightfully so, and that's going to free us up to do higher value work, which we're excited about. But the things that are most unique about each organization, you want to have high degrees of protection around that. So the private LLMs, the private agentic models, the private infrastructure stacks, and those capabilities in our operator, they're going to be really key moving forward.
Well, let me give you an example. There are 2 things that make an enterprise an enterprise: the proprietary data of the enterprise and the unique skills of the enterprise. Your products, your brands, those can all change over time, but those 2 things are the essence of the enterprise. Chatbots and RAG unlocked the proprietary data. Agents are digitizing the unique skills. Now, When we start talking about how sensitive that is, that if you literally take a skill that is done by human beings that work in your company and you transpose it into a technology stack, if that skill is the essence of your company, at Dell, it's the ability to build, RAID algorithms or to develop advanced cooling systems. If we move that into an agentic environment, which might be the right thing to do, but we're not careful about, well, where is that environment? Who is running it? Who owns it? And somehow we have effectively inadvertently outsourced those critical skills to a third party that we no longer control. And then either they fail, they don't work anymore, and we can't recreate it because we don't have any people that do that anymore. So one of the things we're cautioning our customers about is, as you move into agentic, understand this is not just technology. This is a conscious decision about what skills will be done by the human beings that are part of your enterprise and what skills will be done by machines that either you control or someone else provides to you. Those are strategic decisions. The end state is it'll be all of the above. You're going to decide to move some that are perfectly okay. Like I wouldn't dream of being a tax processor. I should use your agents for that. You're good at it. That's not my skill. But on the other hand, a critical engineering skill, a critical capability to understand my supply chain, even if I move it to agentic, I am going to want to control that. I'm going to protect it. I do not want other people being able to use that skill because that is the source of my differentiation. These are serious questions. And I said it in the first wave of AI, and I'm going to say it again. You have got to make strategic decisions around your infrastructure and environment for AI because this, even though you've made choices in the cloud era about where you do stuff, this is not the same stuff. This is stuff that is much more strategic, much more important. And to your point, you are literally re-engineering entire parts of your business process. And if you get it wrong and inadvertently give away a skill or lose a capability and can't reclaim it, you could crater your company. So while it's great technology, with technology comes great responsibility. And that means you got to be very thoughtful and strategic about this. And just because you made a decision in the past about adoption of a cloud or use of a technology, you should not just rubber stamp it into the AI world. You should be very conscious about it.
Yeah, it makes me think of two things. One, you mentioned cloud. And there are some things that remind me of early days with cloud here. One of which, the original design intent for cloud was a simplification one. And to your point, that actually did not play out. Two, it really industrialized tech delivery. And what you just described is remind me that what AI is going to do is somewhat industrialize business delivery. I mean, if you think about our ability to start a new business venture, deliver value, both value optimization, value creation, it's going to be done in a very different way than we could have done that 5 years ago. So when we're thinking about our own agentic workforce and working with our clients on their agentic workforce, we're actually using very similar language we would to any kind of acquisition or human workforce. We think they're functionally equivalent, for lack of a better way to describe it. To your point, a lot of this will entail not commoditizing. A lot of this will entail codifying expertise that today is tribal knowledge in a lot of people's heads, and they gain that through experience and work product and multiple iterations of delivering the same thing or tried and true methods, et cetera, et cetera. And once we codify that into the LLMs and the agents themselves, you have to protect that in a way that you've never had to protect maybe core IP before, while at the same time navigating the complexities of an ecosystem-based capability because agents are going to need to talk to other agents, and then also a very complex distributed system model. So it's going to be exciting to see how this plays out, but lots of complexities.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting and it's going to move fast. Considering agents have become the word of the year in 4 months, and we don't even know what's in front of it. There will be something else. There will be an evolution. There will be new technology. The good news is, course and speed is we're just making business and organizations and processes more productive. We're rebalancing the workflows, and ultimately what's happening is we're just going to move faster. We're going to be more efficient, and that'll have profound impact, not just on our ability to build a product and ship a product, but when you apply this to healthcare, we'll be able to solve, medical conditions that we haven't even thought about. We'll be able to develop drugs we've never developed before. We'll be able to solve material science issues. This is just spectacularly important technology. I'm an optimist. I believe it will work itself out. The only thing, that is the reality that is different this time is the speed in which it's moving means we have to be very, very aware that we're going to cause some disruption, and we're going to have to work through that to make sure that we actually end up on the right side of this, which is why we have to be thoughtful, but we also can't pause and wait for it to work itself out, because by the time it did that, you'd be so far behind you'd never catch up.
I know you and I have talked in the recent weeks around a couple of things we have some concerns about. We are spending a lot of time around responsible AI and guardrails and safety and ethical use, et cetera. As Agentic shapes and we drive AI adoption at enterprise scale, give me an example of something you wish existed that doesn't quite exist yet.
Yeah. The number one issue is, look, agents in isolation are about as useful as a human locked in a room by themselves. They probably have some value, but when you take a bunch of humans and put them together, interesting things happen. And so we know that we need agents to talk to each other. Now, within a single enterprise, maybe you can figure that out, and we're doing that. But when you really think about full potential, that my agent can talk to your agent and can collaborate across distance and across organizations, the thing we discovered in the first several months of this year as we kind of worked with our entire software ecosystem was we have no standards for interworking. We do not have a consensus on how to authenticate an agent, how to authorize an agent, how to share knowledge graphs, how to even prompt one. How do you tell a collection of agents in different domains to do something? The job prompt isn't clear. We know that there's an observability problem, and there's a very long list of things that are in this area of agent interworking. So I desire us to have a way to do that, because once I can interwork, I really start to unlock an entirely different level of value, including using agents as my primary API between businesses. In order to do that, I've been spending a lot of time in Silicon Valley with a lot of the startups and tech companies that we work with, and we're expanding that ecosystem to just get like-minded people together to start to make decisions. The one thing I will tell you is, if you're waiting for a standard to emerge, it's very unlikely that will happen quickly enough. In the AI world, what we've realized is even open source isn't fast enough. And so we're going to likely see de facto standards. If we can all agree to use the same authentication mechanism, then it will become the de facto standard and people will use it and we'll move forward. If we can all agree on a job prompt. So there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration amongst the technology ecosystem to get in front of this. I'll make a prediction. First half of this year, most agentic activities will be constrained to a single domain, a single provider. They'll be kind of behind the walled garden and fairly limited, but still very interesting. By the second half of this year, many of these interworking problems will start to work themselves out. We will have answers to many of those questions because it is moving fast. And probably by the end of the year, we will start to think not about agents as individual workers exclusively, but we'll think about them as ensembles, and we'll also start to believe and see that this is the right way and the right level for organizations to interact with each other. So it becomes the dominant API. Those are big deal changes, and we're probably within a year of them happening based on the current course and speed of the technology work in the industry.
Oh, I like that. We've been very focused on kind of the higher level orchestration. I mean, there's not even, to your point, there's not even a name for these things yet, right? So we've got this loosely coupled AI middleware, for lack of a better way to describe it. And there's whole areas that are yet to really be fleshed out around, like, what does orchestration management look like? You mentioned authentication, authorization, data handling, agent-to-agent communication, agent-to-agent org. I mean, we could just keep going on and on and on. So I like that framing around you cannot wait. So everyone should be leaning in. We're doing the same thing. We've got a vibrant ecosystem of partners and software providers. We're pushing them. We're pushing for interoperability. We think it's going to be really important. If you look at life cycles and what we do, let me think of an example. We audit a lot of companies. We provide assurance and attestation services. Quickly, those data flows and mission critical business processes are going to be supported by a myriad of agents running from all over the place. All the software players, all the SaaS providers, et cetera, are all rapidly introducing agents into their capability set, which is great. But the ability to have traceability and confirmation of how something got executed, soup to nuts, there's some big question marks around that right now. So I like your prediction. I would agree. I think we're in an era now that'll move quickly, but it's going to be domain specific. And then, like you, we're trying to lean in with the right software providers to make sure that we've got right degrees of interoperability as quickly as possible.